Welcome back to another edition of the Magic Leaders Podcast. We discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we have a lot to get into, so we're going to get right into it. But before that, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Shout out to everybody who is already subscribed. And if you're not subscribed, what are you doing? Hit the red button, make it gray, hit the like button so you can thumbs up the video so it can go to more people. But with that being the case, let's go ahead and start today's episode. Let's talk about the Orlando Magic superstar Paolo Banchero, who in a recent interview made a bold claim around the idea of the Orlando Magic pushing for the top seed in the Eastern Conference. And this article that's written about this goes a little bit deeper into how Paolo Banchero plays such a big factor in that. But what Paolo says is, I'm just looking forward to competing at a high level, going to hopefully take the East, get around this new team, this new energy, these new vibes. He later on goes on to talk about Desmond Bane, his new teammate, saying, Desmond Bane is a hell of a player. Can't wait to share the court with him and just compete with him. Let's talk about something that was said later on in the article, though. Something I thought was very intriguing because the article goes into a big breakdown of like what Paolo Banchero does as a 22-year-old superstar forward, what he brings to the table, the kind of potential that he has going into next season. But something I thought was really important was this back portion of what they mentioned in the article, which says the aspect of Banchero's game that has garnered the most attention has been his shot selection. As effective as he is on the floor, his stats are often impacted by decisions to shoot low efficiency shots from mid-range. This criticism gained from this suggests that there are more ways he could expand his offensive arsenal. With time to refine his game this offseason, Banchero will have ample opportunity to shine. Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. Paolo Banchero's ability to expand as a shot distributor is going to be the biggest thing this year, actually more than anything. I think a lot of people are going to say depth. I think a lot of people are going to say three-point shooting. No. Shot versatility and diversity from Paolo Banchero will be the biggest thing that impacts this season for the Orlando Magic. Here's the reason why. Because it will be an indication that the floor spacing is working. It will be an indication that the improvements from Franz Wagner as a ball handler, distributor, and slasher are working. If Paolo Banchero, which part of it is decision making, part of it is victim of circumstance. If Paolo Banchero is able to diversify his shot selection much more than settling for low efficiency mid-range shots in early clock, much more than positioning himself to have to play much more to the back of the basket without actually making real post moves or getting legitimate post touches and having to create post opportunities strictly for himself. If he's able to get more catch and shoot opportunities, more catch and go, slash to the basket, get to the rim opportunities, more make a one quick. I've said this about Jason Tatum on a million different platforms, and I haven't said it on this one because obviously we covered the Orlando Magic. But I think this same logic applies to Paolo Banchero. I've always said that Jason Tatum is the most dangerous player in the NBA when he gets the ball and makes a decision from the catch. When Jason Tatum commits to a decision off the catch, he is one of the most dangerous players in the NBA, if not the most dangerous player. I believe that Paolo Banchero is in that conversation when it comes to when he first touches the ball, he makes a quick decision. That is when he's most dangerous. His rookie season, that was so implied by his ability to get to the free throw line at such a high rate. Yes, his physicality had a lot to do with that, but more so than his physicality, his ability to take the ball off the catch, make a quick decision to drive, barrel his way to the basket, and force guys to have to commit to either foul him, slide double team, which usually would still force some level of contact, or force a guy into a situation where they would have no real leverage but to let him score. That's when Paolo Banchero is the most dangerous. And I think that his quick decision making as a shot operator is also going to spread to his decision making as a passer, especially now that he has more reliable weapons. This is very, very reminiscent of a team like, I would say a team very similar to what the Minnesota Timberwolves were last season, or maybe the season prior. Anthony Edwards always has had a co-star in some conjunction. Karl Anthony Towns, last season, I would actually say last season is a better representation. With Julius Randle being another guy who could take the ball handling responsibilities away, right? But the 3-point floor spacing provided by a guy like Dante DiVincenzo, for example, the knockdown 3-point ability of Nickeil Alexander-Walker for that team, paired with Anthony Edwards' shot diversity changing to where he was taking 7, 8, 9 3-point attempts per game, opened up the floor so much that we also saw one of the best versions of Julius Randle we've ever seen. Although he wasn't an all-star, although he wasn't an all-NBA player, last season he was probably one of his most effective years when healthy. Paolo Banchero falls into the Julius Randle category in terms of where I'm saying in this, but I think that he could be in the Ant Edwards tier because of the kind of overall skill set that Paolo brings to the table. Paolo Banchero to me is a guy that when you get in floor spacing, and I feel like you can say this about a lot of people, but Paolo Banchero in particular is a guy that I feel like with the proper floor spacing and shot diet distribution could be a guy that walks himself into 30 points per game. I really, really believe that. I think Paolo Banchero has a chance to walk himself into 30 points per game next season. Simply off of the fact that the floor spacing will create a much easier opportunity for him to get to the spots that he wants to get to. And even if he wants to settle for mid-range shots, they will not be difficult shot attempts with him being swarmed by guys halfway, 1 foot still stuck in the paint because they don't have to respect shooters. This year they have a multitude of different guys, talking about the Orlando Magic, that have to be respected from beyond the arc. And that's going to open up a lot for Paolo to then be able to diversify his shot diet in a way that creates a more efficient flowing offense, especially when played through him. So I think that Paolo Banchero has the Orlando Magic in a really solid spot. And more particularly, I think they are going to be a really solid offense with a guy like Paolo Banchero, who my personal prediction is that I think Paolo is going to be a top 5 to top 7 MVP candidate next year, legitimately. Next, let's go to Clutch Points. Clutch Points had an interesting article that focused on the idea of essentially the Orlando Magic missing out on a particular play this offseason. And I thought it was kind of interesting because it was like, it feels like the Magic did everything possible to build themselves up. And the biggest thing that Clutch Points touched on as the thing that they hurt themselves this offseason for was depth, particularly point guard depth / shooting guard depth, which I thought was kind of interesting because, yes, at the shooting guard position, we talked about it many a times, that Jace Richardson seems like he's going to have to be a guy that slots at the 2. But the article particularly touches on Anthony Black being a guy who, because of his offensive liability, could be a big foible for this team, considering the fact that he has essentially tasked himself as a one-way player at the moment because he's not a high-level 3-point shooter. So he doesn't even provide true 3 and D ability at the point guard position. The article goes on to mention names like trading for Colin Sexton, going after D'Angelo Russell in free agency, and the name, considering he's still in restricted free agency right now, that came up also was Cam Thomas. Now, I don't believe that the Orlando Magic didn't address their depth issue. I think their biggest foible in terms of the depth might be that their wing spot is still relatively up for grabs, or not up for grabs, but in terms of off the bench, it's pretty much just Tristan da Silva. And then I would say their 2-guard position is going to be made up of point guards that simply play the 2-guard spot, right? So I think the biggest thing, though, is their depth conversations are all built around the fact that they were so injured last year. The likelihood that they're as injury prone as they were last season, I'm not going to say it's nothing, but I think that they have a much better chance of being healthier than what last year was, given the context that all three of their star players went down with more than 10 to 15 games worth of injury over the course of the entire year. I also think they addressed their biggest need, which was three-point shooting, in a multitude of different ways. Getting Jalen Suggs back healthy addresses it. Signing Tyus Jones addresses it. Bringing in Jace Richardson addresses it, right? And then from a forward perspective, you already have Paolo Banchero, Franz, and then you fill out with Tristan Da Silva. You really don't need too much further depth than that. I think that the Orlando Magic handled their depth situation very well. Let's take what they suggested in terms of the guys they threw out as potential names for the Orlando Magic to have targeted instead, right? I would have liked Colin Sexton. I don't like the idea of an undersized guard leading the way next to Jalen Suggs as like the starting backcourt. But could Colin Sexton have been a good backup point guard? I think that would have been solid. I think that if he fills the role of Tyus Jones, as much as I like Colin Sexton, I think Tyus Jones brings more of what the Orlando Magic need right now off the bench. Let's say they went after D'Angelo Russell. I think D'Angelo Russell would have also been a really solid pickup. I'm assuming all of this is taking into account Desmond Bane. So Colin Sexton coming off the bench, I still think he's solid. Again, I like Tyus Jones more. Tyus Jones versus D'Angelo Russell is a little bit closer. I think that Tyus Jones is more efficient. I think he's less likely to take over the offense in a way that I think D'Angelo Russell sometimes can kind of monopolize himself into kind of wanting to become a one-man show, even if he is a high-level passer. I do think for our second unit, a shot creator with his kind of versatility is something that this Orlando Magic team kind of is missing across the board. I don't think anybody has a creative shot diet similar to D'Angelo Russell's on this Orlando Magic roster. That can be said for good or for bad. And then the last one being Cam Thomas. Cam Thomas is basically what we were saying a couple of episodes back about with Malik Monk. I think that Cam Thomas is just obviously younger. I think Malik Monk is definitely more athletic. If we could get Cam Thomas on a very, very budget-friendly contract, which we can't with the kind of money we have available, because honestly, the Magic the Brooklyn Nets would literally just be able to match whatever we would offer them, like in an instant. But Cam Thomas, or an archetype like Cam Thomas, would actually be a really solid fit at that two-guard position, because again, similar to what I just said about D'Angelo Russell, we don't really have anybody that has that diverse on-ball shot creation diet to really give us, legitimate scoring from the backcourt in a multitude of different ways. Desmond Bane doesn't have that kind of bag. Jalen Suggs doesn't have that kind of bag. Jace Richardson might be the closest thing to that in terms of the kind of versatility he has as a shot creator. So if I had to rank them, I'd probably actually put D'Angelo Russell at the number one of that, then Cam Thomas, then Colin Sexton. Clutch points, although had some points about the depth, I still think at the end of the day, the Orlando Magic fleshed themselves out. If you want to say, oh, can they withstand injury? You can say that about a multitude of different teams. Shoot, we're going into the Eastern Conference where three teams are being disregarded in a real way, or at least undermined compared to where they would be in normal seasons, simply because of a single injury. Granted, yes, to a star player, but again, still, nonetheless, a single injury has an outlook on these teams that's significantly different than what our usual takeaways are. So, of course, that's always going to be a factor. I think the talent of our depth is good. Jace Richardson, Tyus Jones, Anthony Black. You have Goga Batadze, Jonathan Isaac, Mo Wagner, Tristan Da Silva. Again, that 3 spot is a little spotty. Jet Howard's on the team still. It's a little spotty at that 3 spot. But again, you have Paolo Banchero and you have Franz Wagner, and then you have Tristan Da Silva. I think it's pretty fleshed out across the board. Orlando did what they needed to do. Let's go into a quick article where they discuss the idea of the Orlando Magic bringing in Russell Westbrook. The article states that why it would work is Westbrook, 36, remains one of the most athletic guards in the league, bringing relentless energy and unmatched hustle on both ends of the floor. While he's no longer the MVP or triple-double machine of his prime, the nine-time All-Star still offers strong value as a defensive playmaker off the bench with the ability to step into a starting role when needed. Specifically fitting into the Magic's lineup, Westbrook would immediately boost their tempo and fast break opportunities. Both are key needs after Orlando recorded the second slowest pace in the league last season. The Magic also dealt with injuries to their three core stars at different points, which hurt their offensive rhythm. With limited ball handling, depth behind Banchero, Wagner, and Suggs, Westbrook could join Bane, Jones, and Anthony Black as one of the team's primary facilitators while offering durability and experience. Now, it does preface why it won't work, why it wouldn't work. While Westbrook could provide valuable minutes to the roster, still developing its depth, his fit with the Magic is questionable. A career 30.5% three-point shooter, Westbrook is least effective as a spot-up option and thrives most with the ball in his hands. This potentially conflicts with Banchero's growth as an offensive primary creator. I think that Russell Westbrook would be really interesting. Russell Westbrook would actually be really interesting, particularly, again, looking at that two spot. Particularly when you could put a defensive-oriented guard like Anthony Black next to Russell Westbrook, who, with his athleticism and slashing ability, can learn a lot from Russell Westbrook as an offensive generator off the bench. Talking about Anthony Black. You can add shooting in Jace Richardson next to Russell Westbrook to compensate for his 30.5% three-point shooting acumen. So you have that versatility. You also have the ability to get a guy like Tyus Jones next to Russell Westbrook, where although the defense will not be that solid, you can say the same thing about Russell being next to Jace Richardson. Although the defense won't be insanely solid, Tyus Jones' ability to help get the ball to Russell Westbrook in the spots that he needs it to be most effective also is a very versatile way to utilize Russell Westbrook's skills. So all three bench guards that you have provide a skill set that will exploit the issue that most plagues Russell Westbrook in certain circumstances, right? Three-point shooting. Jace Richardson will add that next to Russell Westbrook. Defensive acumen. Yes, Russell Westbrook is a high-level defender for his athleticism, but it's really him being a high-level defender because of his athleticism, not necessarily because he's a good defender. Anthony Black brings real elite defense. Tyus Jones brings somebody who, when you have a guy like Russell Westbrook who can play very erratic, Tyus Jones can be the quote-unquote yin to Russell Westbrook's yang. I actually think that getting Russ would be really solid here. I think it would be a very sneaky pickup to get him for the cheap. And I think that it would be a lot of kind of our conversation around whether or not to pick back up Victor Oladipo. It would be a similar conversation to the Victor Oladipo conversation, except we know who Russell Westbrook is a lot more because Victor Oladipo has been away from basketball for the last 2 years. Russell Westbrook, we've seen him. I think the Clippers time frame was a much better representation of how he can fit as a cog in a system. And he was effective. He was very effective in the time that he was there. And I think that Russell Westbrook can bring that to an Orlando Magic team that needs guard depth from the perspective of scoring versatility. And a guy who I think adds real veteran leadership in a locker room full of young guys. Again, it would be him and Tyus Jones as two of the more so vets of the team. And I think that could be really helpful, especially when you're talking about a guy like a former MVP in Russ. So he's going to be a dude that's, for example, even a guy like Paolo Banchero would really want to learn and gain knowledge from and be able to just gain a lot from in general by being in the same, being in the same rooms as him on a daily basis. I actually think that Russell Westbrook could be a really solid pickup. Of everything we've discussed so far in the pod, so as we've gone along, this might be the most interesting topic. Let me know in the comment section down below. Would you guys be interested on a budget bargain deal to bring in Russell Westbrook to the Orlando Magic. I actually think we've got some interesting names, right? Malik Monk has come up. LaMelo Ball, obviously. Um, we've had a handful of different guys come up. Victor Oladipo, I mentioned earlier. Russell Westbrook, when you match price point with what he brings to the table to this team, might actually be one of the most interesting possibilities of all that we've discussed because he would be acquired on such a cheap contract, likely a 1 year, a 1 year with a team option or a straight 1 year, kind of like we did with Tyus Jones, and he would sufficiently fill a gap as a off the bench scorer that when you put him with the second unit, you could just tell him, you put him next to Goga Batadze and Mo Wagner, add some kind of shooting with like a Jace Richardson, and you have Tristan Da Silva for more athleticism, or just a full athlete lineup of run and gun with Russell Westbrook at the 1, Anthony Black at the 2, Tristan Da Silva at the 3, Mo Wagner at the 4, Goga Batadze at the 5, and you just are athletes just running back and forth, just being super athletic, finishing around the rim, pushing pace. I mean, Russell Westbrook single-handedly with that unit would push them from second slowest team in the league last season to easily like top 15 with just that unit alone. I think that could actually be a really interesting fit, and the Orlando Magic might want to consider making a cap flexibility move to maybe be able to bring in a guy like Russ, because for what the money is worth, he's the most attainable of the lots that we've named, while also fitting in a really interesting way. But you guys let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. And last but not least, we're going to end with another hypothetical trade. The crux of the hypothetical trade are that we would get Dante DiVincenzo, that I believe the Atlanta Hawks would get, let me actually bring it up all the way just to make sure. The Atlanta Hawks would get Mike Conley and 2 second-round picks from Minnesota. The Timberwolves would get Jonathan Isaac, and Orlando would get Dante DiVincenzo in a 2032 first-round pick swap from Minnesota. No. No. I like Dante DiVincenzo. I like what his shot distribution is from a three-point versatility standpoint. I think that him as a guy that can shoot from the top of the key, off the catch, off the dribble, a guy who can be a really nice knockdown shooter from the corner specialist spots. I think that he's a really good player. I also think that last year was not a good representation of who he is as an overall player on both sides of the floor. I think he had like an okay year, but I also don't know if I think we're getting to the point that we're getting almost a little redundant. I think that Dante DiVincenzo will be the most athletic guy outside of Anthony Black. Well, no, actually, that's wrong because Jalen Suggs, I think, would count as well. Dante DiVincenzo would be the third most athletic guy in the backcourt while bringing three-point shooting. Dante DiVincenzo would basically just be an extension of what Jalen Suggs is, which, not to say that's a bad thing, but I don't think we need the redundancy of what Jalen Suggs is when Jonathan Isaac plays such a pivotal role. This section is going to be a little bit shorter because I just really don't like it. I just thought that it was an interesting article because, again, there's another Jonathan Isaac trade, and there are going to be a ton of different Jonathan Isaac trade scenarios. But I don't think Jonathan Isaac is worth giving up for a redundant player. Jalen Suggs fits the mold very well. Yes, by having a guy who fits the Jalen Suggs role so to a T, if Jalen Suggs goes down with injury, as we've seen in past seasons, it will be like a glove fit, right? But I think at the same time, you brought in Tyus Jones for this reason. You drafted Jace Richardson for this reason. You brought in Noah Penda for things like this. So, with all that being said, helping the Hawks out by getting them another, veteran-style guy in Mike Conley, who could be a secondary ball handler, a dude who brings veteranship to the locker room, and also giving them 2 second-round picks. Why are we helping the Atlanta Hawks out? And then for the Minnesota Timberwolves, oddly enough, they really, really gain a lot by getting Jonathan Isaac because that also gives them the chance to set up a move where if Jonathan Isaac is hyper-effective in his time on the floor, makes a guy like Rudy Gobert, who's aging quickly, more expendable. And of course, him becoming expendable is a good thing for the Minnesota Timberwolves to a certain extent because he's a guy that they do have a lucrative deal with. And if they can find a budget version of being able to get similar productivity defensively from a spot like Jonathan Isaac, that gives them the ability to move off of Rudy Gobert while he still is a relatively high commodity for the position. All that being said, hypothetical trade, down the toilet. I'm not really a fan of it. You guys let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think, though. That has been another episode of the Magic Latest Podcast. Again, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content, and I will see you guys tomorrow.